Ontario is set to bring in a vaccine passport system, according to CBC News sources. This despite Premier Doug Ford's previously saying he doesn't want a, quote, split society. Liberal leader Justin Trudeau promised $1 billion to create a vaccine passport system. Conservative leader Erin O'Toole says he will respect the province's choices. NDP leader Jagmeet Singh wants to see a federal vaccine document. So how do younger partisans view the issue? Hannan Mohamud is a law student, writer, and former staffer to former Alberta Premier Rachel Notley. She's in Edmonton. Anushka Kurian is a former Liberal field organizer. She's in Toronto. Daniel Perry, a former Conservative Senate staffer. And he's where I am, in Ottawa. Not exactly where I am, but close enough, in the same city. Anyway, hello to all three of you.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi. Hannan, I'll start with you. What do you think about Ontario moving to a vaccine certificate or passport after sort of all the debate in this province and the resistance at the highest political levels?
Yeah, hi. Thank you for having me here today. I think it's worth to start this conversation noting that Canadians, especially youth, are still in the midst of a devastating pandemic. And we have long called for strong, ethical, and stable leadership. So that means wanting clear, unwavering decisions on things such as vaccines, which has somehow become a political wedge issue that we're seeing, well, today. We know that from polling, youth show that when they less believe or trust in political public institutions, they're less likely to want to vote. And so this lack of a clear stance from not just Doug Ford's government, but also the federal government as well, has shown that vaccine passports became this wedge issue that has like festered into now becoming like an actual political a political issue at the end of the day, honestly. And so the consequences that universities and small businesses have to step up and implement plans on their own to deal with not just the issue of anti-vaxxers, but also how to create a safe space for students. As a board of governor with the University of Ottawa, I've seen how the university had to step up to make a safe campus because provincial and federal leaders didn't, which is, the least to say, disappointing.
Daniel, what's your take on this, especially given that Doug Ford has been so resistant to this, and here we have him now apparently ready to give it a green light, and we know that Erin O'Toole is not on the same side of this, presumably, as of next week.
It's very clear it's a provincial issue, and I'm very happy to see that Mr. Ford has stepped up and he has done what politicians should do and listen to Canadians, listen to the voters, and in Mr. Ford's case, listen to the people of Ontario. If you look at a public opinion poll, it's very clear that people want this. And I think we're going to be seeing premiers across Canada start implementing them as well if they've not done so already. Mr. O'Toole has been perfectly clear since the beginning of COVID and when the vaccines became eligible for Canadians that the best way to get out of the pandemic is to take a vaccine. And today he was even clearer on that, saying that he supports the provinces. He supports provinces and their right to decide, because at the end of the day, it is a provincial issue and not one that is at the federal table. And we should probably leave it at that, because I don't think it makes sense for federal politicians to weigh in on provincial ones. They're running for prime minister and not to be the premier of a province.
Anushka, obviously, like, no one can speak for all people, but just what's your sense of it? Like, those that your friends, your colleagues, people in your general age group, how do they see this issue?
A lot of youth that I've spoken to, so I door knock across the Toronto area for Liberals, and something I've heard at the door, something I've seen in polls online and heard from other youth my age, is that the pandemic hits youth the most, among the most. The youth are the first to feel the economic impacts of a recession, and this past year has been really hard on a lot of youth. In the past few weeks alone, the number of COVID cases as well has been largely between that 20 and 29 age range. So I think that today, the announcement today by the Prime Minister is a great, clear answer for a lot of youth. And it's a beacon of hope for a lot of youth that they need, because this is a national problem. This is a national nationally felt pandemic, and there is no way that we're going to get through this without a nationally supported strategy. We saw the Prime Minister today put money where his mouth is and pledge to support provinces in the way that they're going to need to roll out effective vaccination plans. And so I'm very, very pleased with the way this is heading, and yeah.
Hannan, Anushka brings up the younger people all the time and now contracting COVID-19. We're certainly seeing that in Alberta. I mean, do you feel that this is a conversation that can be divorced from politics, because it's become so political? And I do wonder sometimes whether that hinders things or not. You know, when politics gets involved, sometimes people don't see so clearly.
Yeah, I do agree with you. I think that I'm going to just highlight Alberta and Ontario again, because it's such a good example of the two largest provinces in this country having mountains of track records of failing terribly in leadership when it comes to daily counts, and both premiers ironically being missing right now in the midst of a federal election. We know that while Liberals and NDPs have criticized the provincial premiers, we've seen less of that from the Conservatives. The Conservative leader himself has been praising Jason Kenney, which is like a stark reality of what we're seeing, as you point out, in Alberta right now. The highest hit of people that are experiencing COVID are people from the ages of 18 to 39. So that's within my age range as well. So we know that provinces are important, as vaccine records are controlled by provinces. So that literally means a relationship needs to exist between the federal government and provinces, especially if the decision today does happen to go through. My questions do arise from, is an elected Liberal government able to push through hard deadlines, contingency plans for provinces? What happens when they choose not to follow? Are there going to be pay leave for anyone who does have to go get a vaccination? So there's just a lot of questions that I have, although I do think it is a good decision. It just opened up even more questions in regards to how this will happen.
Right. We have less than 2 minutes left, but I do want to get a quick take from all of you on the situation with Vote on Campus, because Elections Canada could not make it happen this time around. And Daniel, how much of an impact do you think that's going to have on the youth vote?
Look, I would be remiss if I didn't lead off by saying that I've also been door knocking for the Conservatives in Eastern Ontario as well. So that's kind of forming some of my opinions today. But when it comes to voting on campus, I think it's a big mistake, and it's that simple. Young people should have access to voting, and that's fundamental to our democracy. That's why we have mobile polls in other parts of our communities. In 2019 alone, over 100,000 students voted on campus. When you're in a new city, you're returning to campus after being away for a year and a half, the last thing you want to do is be wandering around the community. And for a prime minister who claims to be a champion of youth and the minister of youth, I'm very disappointed to see him call this election and really put youth at this disadvantage.
Anushka, what about you? How much of an impact do you think it's going to have?
Well, to start, Elections Canada is not a partisan entity, and so it's important, I think, to separate out the two. But as someone who used the Vote on Campus system when I voted at U of T 2 years ago, I'm disappointed that it's not going to be made available to a lot of students. It's, of course, really unfortunate, because more access to youth voting is exactly what we need right now after how much youth have been impacted by the past almost 2 years of the pandemic. And we know for a fact that in 2019, voter turnout for young people dropped by about 3% from 2015. And that's hundreds of thousands of young people that didn't vote in 2019 that I really hope will come out to vote this time. I think the pro to the con of this not being in place this time around is that youth can still vote by absentee ballot. You can still order a ballot, you can still cast your vote, and you can do it while you're at school for your home riding. I grew up in BC and I voted in BC in 2019, and I plan on hopefully doing that again this time around. So it's still a very easily accessible option. And so if you are a young person, I really encourage you to look that up, figure out the information early, order your ballot, and make use of that mail-in ballot option.
Okay, good advocacy, I would say. And on that, we will we'll have to wrap it up because we are out of time. But thank you all. It was great to meet you. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, Kathleen.
You bet.